There is a kind of poison that travels not through veins, but through whispers, a quiet venom, born not from power but from impotence. It needs no battlefield, no weapon, just a mouth, a weak mind, and an audience just gullible enough to listen. That poison is gossip, the currency of cowards, and the revenge of the failures. Look around you. Those who build empires have no time to discuss the shadows cast by others. But those who sit among ruins, too afraid to build, too bitter to grow, sharpen their tongues and talk. They disguise their envy with concern, their resentment with humor, and their cowardice with collective mockery. Their gossip is not harmless, it is calculated warfare against those who make them feel small simply by succeeding. Gossip is not merely idle chatter, it is an act of psychological warfare. It is what the weak resort to when they cannot compete on merit, intellect, or discipline. They cannot stand on the same ground as those who strive, so they try to pull them into the mud. Gossip is how failures feel powerful for a moment, by momentarily bringing down someone who reminds them of their own inadequacy. It is the only arena where they feel strong, because in the world of action, results, and courage, they are nothing more than spectators, too afraid to enter the arena themselves. There is a reason the ambitious are always targets of gossip. Not because they are wrong, but because they are doing what others won't dare to do. Every step you take above the average triggers a silent hatred in those who have made peace with their mediocrity. They will not attack your logic. They cannot debate your vision. So, they strike where it hurts your reputation, your name, your relationships. Gossipers don't attack facts. They attack character, because competence threatens the lazy. Discipline humiliates the undisciplined, and vision exposes the blind. So they talk, because that's all they have. Understand the psychology behind it. Those who spread gossip are deeply insecure. They feel unseen, unimportant, irrelevant. Gossip becomes their stage. It gives them a brief illusion of control. For a moment, they are the ones holding attention, shaping opinions, creating narratives. But it is a false power, borrowed and brittle. Because what is built on lies eventually collapses under the weight of truth. And no matter how many people they poison with their whispers, it will never erase the emptiness of their own unfulfilled lives. The more they talk about others, the more they avoid the silence that reminds them of who they've become. And yet, so many powerful individuals fall victim to the noise. They react, they explain, they descend. But reacting to gossip is like fighting a ghost. The moment you acknowledge it, it grows. The wise do not explain. They do not answer. They rise above, and in doing so, expose the gossipers for what they truly are. Jealous spectators disguised as critics. When you know your value, you stop renting space in your mind to those who haven't earned your attention. A lion does not concern itself with the opinions of sheep, and your destiny was not meant to be negotiated in the court of public opinion. Gossip thrives where purpose is absent. The more focused you are on your mission, the less you hear the noise around you. Failures gossip because they have nothing better to do, nothing to chase, nothing to become. Their days are not filled with creating, planning, building, or growing. So they fill the void with the drama of others. Their conversations revolve around people because they have no ideas, no vision, no discipline. But look closely, every person who's ever made history, every leader who's challenged the status quo, every rebel who's dared to dream, they were all gossiped about. Because the higher you rise, the more visible you become to those who never moved. And this is the essence of their revenge. They cannot match you, so they talk about you. Gossip is their rebellion against greatness, a rebellion destined to fail, because in the end, the world remembers builders, not backbitters. History writes names in stone, not rumors in dust. You will never hear of a statue erected for a gossip, No legacy is built on slander, but while gossip fades like smoke, real impact echoes for generations. Let the failures talk, you keep building. Let them laugh, you keep moving. Their revenge is noise. Yours is legacy. You must learn to see gossip not as a threat, but as a sign that you are rising, that you are different, that you disturb their comfort zones just by existing. You do not need to defend yourself in rooms you've outgrown. Silence is your sword. Progress is your response. The louder they get, the more threatened they are. And the most threatening thing you can do to a failure is succeed loudly, unapologetically, and relentlessly. Gossip is the weapon of the powerless who lack the courage to confront reality or rise above mediocrity. This truth cuts through the social fabric like a sharp blade, revealing what most try to conceal beneath layers of fake smiles, passive aggression, and empty laughter. It is no coincidence that those who gossip the most are often the ones doing the least. They are not movers, not builders, not thinkers. They are watchers, reactors, and critics from the cheap seats. They don't understand the mechanics of greatness because they've never had the discipline or the courage to pursue it. So instead of rising, they reduce. Instead of acting, they analyze, not for growth but for destruction. Gossip becomes their only available form of retaliation against a world that has moved on without them. There is a psychology behind this. The human mind, when confronted with inadequacy, will either transform or deflect. The strong reflect and ask, "What must I do to become more?" The weak, however, do not ask, they defend. They protect their fragile ego by projecting failure outward. Gossip becomes the firewall of their self-esteem. By bringing down someone else, even verbally, they gain a temporary illusion of superiority. But this illusion is toxic. It does not heal, it does not grow. It only numbs, and over time it builds a personality shaped entirely by reaction rather than initiative. This is how mediocrity becomes permanent, when self-awareness is traded for self-deception, and growth is replaced by gossip. What they lack is not opportunity, it is courage. The courage to face themselves, to admit that they are not doing enough, to confront the bitter taste of wasted time. It's easier to laugh at the person who wakes up early than to discipline yourself to do the same. It's easier to criticize someone chasing their dream than to deal with the emptiness of having none. Gossip, then, is not just a habit, it's an emotional coping mechanism. It shields them from the guilt of wasted potential. It gives their pain a voice, even if that voice is laced with venom. People who gossip don't want to confront the truth because truth requires action. To admit that someone else is ahead of you is to accept that you've been stagnant. To acknowledge someone else's courage is to face your own cowardice, and that is unbearable for the ones who have built their identity on victimhood. So they weaponize words. They form alliances of the unaccomplished. They bond over bitterness. This is why gossip circles are so tightly knit. They are not friendships built on love or loyalty, but pacts of mutual resentment. Their connection lies in shared dissatisfaction. And the moment one of them begins to grow, to evolve, to change, they too become a target. This is why those who dare to be different, to aim higher, to break patterns, are always met with resistance first in the form of gossip. Because progress threatens people who are committed to staying the same, it forces them to question their comfort zones, so they talk, they mock, they distort, but they do not confront directly, because direct confrontation requires strength. And that's what they lack, not just physical or intellectual strength, but spiritual and emotional strength. The kind of strength it takes to admit you're wrong. The kind of strength required to unlearn and relearn. The kind of strength it takes to grow. When someone who has failed not once or twice, but habitually and systemically resorts to gossip, it's a last, ditch effort to remain relevant. They have no results to show. They have no legacy to speak of, so they rewrite reality in their own words. They attack those who remind them of what they could have been. And make no mistake, they gossip not because you've done something wrong, but because you've done something they couldn't. This is the unspoken truth behind the whispers. It's not about your flaws, it's about their failures. Every smear, every backhanded comment is a confession, a silent cry that says, I cannot reach you, so I will attempt to pull you down. And it's always easier to drag down than to climb up. That's why the powerless choose this weapon. It requires no effort, no courage, no sacrifice, just a mouth and a weak soul, but it is a self-defeating weapon, because while it might damage reputations for a time, it never builds one. Gossip does not earn respect. It buys momentary attention from the equally lost, and when the dust settles and the crowd moves on, the gossiper remains in the same place, bitter, alone, forgotten. In this way, gossip is not just an attack on others, it's a slow suicide of one's own potential. Every time they choose words over work, mockery over mastery, or sarcasm over skill, they dig their own grave a little deeper. They think they're getting ahead by pulling others back, but what they don't realize is they're standing still, watching the world pass them by. The revenge they think they are exacting is nothing but a cry for help wrapped in ridicule, and the truly powerful understand this. They don't fight back with words, they fight back with excellence, because the only true answer to gossip is greatness. The psychology of gossip reveals a deep envy toward those who dare to succeed or break social conformity. Behind every casual remark laced with sarcasm or every sly grin exchanged in a whisper lies an unspoken truth. Someone is uncomfortable with your growth. It isn't about what you've done wrong, it's about what you've done right. Because in a world where most people silently settle, the individual who dares to defy the norm becomes a threat. Your ambition disrupts their resignation. Your success forces them to look inward, and for many, that's a terrifying mirror. It shows them the hours they wasted, the chances they never took, the discipline they never developed. So, instead of acknowledging that discomfort and transforming it into inspiration, they cover it with gossip, a psychological defense mechanism that converts envy into moral superiority. When someone sees you rise while they remain stuck, their subconscious begins a war between admiration and resentment. They admire your courage, but resent how your courage exposes their cowardice. They admire your achievements, but detest how your progress reveals their inertia. The envy festers, and since direct confrontation would require self-honesty and vulnerability, they choose the easier route, gossip. It allows them to regain a sense of power without having to change. They can distort your motives, downplay your hard work, and question your integrity, all while avoiding their own inadequacies. It becomes a way to escape accountability. By tearing you down, they momentarily feel lifted, even if only in the illusion they've created for themselves. Gossip provides a psychological shortcut for fragile egos. It's far easier to question your methods than to question their habits. It's easier to say you got lucky than to admit they lacked consistency. It's easier to say you changed than to confront why they've remained the same for years. This isn't about morality, it's about ego. People don't gossip because they care about the truth. They gossip because they care about preserving their version of reality, where your success is illegitimate and their stagnation is justified. It's a psychological balancing act. Your rise tips the scales, and gossip becomes their desperate attempt to bring equilibrium not through progress, but through sabotage. Social conformity plays a significant role in this mental dynamic. The majority find safety in sameness. When you challenge that by thinking differently, living boldly, or refusing to abide by unspoken rules, you expose their hidden desire to rebel, but lack of courage to do so. They see in you the freedom they wish they had, and that freedom, that refusal to be boxed in, enrage them more than any offense you could commit. You become the living contradiction to the excuses they've built their lives around. Every step you take into authenticity feels like an attack on their compliance. So they respond the only way they can without facing themselves. They whisper behind your back. What they're truly gossiping about isn't your actions, it's their fear that you're becoming someone they never allowed themselves to be. You're creating a version of life that threatens their comfort zone. In their mind, if they can discredit your journey, they can avoid questioning their own path. That's why even the most minor wins of yours are met with exaggerated criticisms or sly jokes. Your wins force a confrontation with their internal failure to act. And gossip becomes their shield. It allows them to mock what they can't manage and distort what they can't digest. This is why gossip almost always increases when you begin to change. The moment you step away from the patterns they are still addicted to, you stop being relatable. You become foreign, unpredictable, and human nature fears what it can't predict. They know who you were. They counted on you staying there emotionally, socially, even psychologically. But when you break away, when your priorities shift, your standards rise, and your pace quickens, they panic. Not for you, but for themselves. Because your transformation reminds them that change is possible, and they no longer have the excuse of inevitability. They can't say, "People never change," because you did. They can't say it's too late, because you proved otherwise, and now they have to live with the fact that their excuses are unraveling, so they attack. The attack is never upfront, because even they know that you've grown stronger. So it becomes subtle. Hints, passive remarks, a tone of mockery disguised as concern. But beneath every word is the quiet hum of envy, vibrating with the fear that you've moved into a world they won't dare to enter. That's what gossip really is, fear of your difference. Your refusal to conform shatters the social mirror they've built to keep themselves comfortable. And when people can't pull you back into the mold, they try to discredit the mold breaker. If they can convince others that you've become arrogant, selfish, cold, or unrelatable, then they don't have to admit that you've simply evolved and they've stayed the same. The mind that gossips is a mind that cannot stand silence, because in silence, their envy speaks too loudly. So they fill the void with words about you. Your name becomes their escape, but no matter how many times they speak it, they cannot become it, and that realization burns. It is this psychological friction, the internal war between their admiration and their resentment, that fuels the flames of gossip. Not because they hate you, but because you remind them of who they could have been if they had made a different choice. And instead of making that choice now, they continue talking, not realizing that every word they speak only makes your silence more powerful. Those who gossip attempt to sabotage what they cannot attain or understand. They attack character when they can't match competence. It becomes a pattern of psychological sabotage, not grounded in fact, but in frustration. They see someone achieving something unfamiliar to them: discipline, vision, power, self-control, and rather than seek to understand or emulate it, they dismantle it in their minds. And because they can't deconstruct your strategy, because they don't know the hours, sacrifices, failures, and internal battles you fought, they target the only thing they can reach: your name, your reputation, the perception of you. They assassinate your character because your competence is beyond their reach. The people who resort to gossip do so because meritocracy terrifies them. In a world where effort and consistency matter, they are exposed. Their laziness has consequences, their excuses collapse, so rather than confront that reality, they invert it. They begin rewriting the story. Suddenly, your drive is called arrogance. Your focus is labeled coldness. Your ambition becomes greed. The narrative shifts not because you've changed, but because they've decided they cannot accept the truth. They turn to character attacks not because they've uncovered something real about you, but because their own failure demands a villain. And since your success stands in stark contrast to their mediocrity, you become the perfect target. Character becomes the easiest weapon in the hands of the inadequate. When someone can't undermine your results, they'll attempt to poison your image. They'll smile in your face and then plant seeds of doubt in the minds of others when you're not around. Their comments are carefully worded, vague enough to seem innocent, yet loaded with implications. She's not who she seems. He's changed a lot lately. I just don't trust him anymore. What they really mean is, he grew and I didn't. But they can't say that. So they twist their envy into suspicion. It's not your success that's offensive to them, it's the fact that you earned it, and they didn't. This psychological warfare is not always loud. In fact, the most effective character attacks are whispered. Gossip travels through insinuation, not evidence. No one asks for proof. No one verifies. All it takes is tone, timing, and tension. And the damage begins. Because most people are not emotionally strong enough to resist a juicy distortion. Insecure people are drawn to gossip like flies to decay, not because they believe it, but because it gives them relief. If the person they envy turns out to be flawed, it validates their own stagnation. That's the emotional economy of gossip. It's less about the truth and more about giving comfort to the underachieving majority. You see this most clearly when someone dares to step into a new level of promotion, a new business, a transformation in mindset. Suddenly, people who once supported them begin to pull away. The applause turns into distance, then into criticism, then into character analysis. Why? Because change creates distance, and that distance creates insecurity. When you evolve, you no longer reflect the version of you that they could control, understand, or manipulate. So they turn on you, not with confrontation that would take courage, but with whispers, with suspicions, with backhanded narratives that slowly dismantle the foundation of your social identity. What makes gossip particularly venomous is that it infects others. One person's insecurity, if unchecked, becomes a group's perception. And very quickly, competence becomes a threat, not an inspiration. Character is questioned not because it deserves to be, but because it's easier to doubt than to aspire. A single suggestion of arrogance spreads faster than a lifetime of humility. This is why many powerful people become withdrawn. They realize that every room they enter comes with eyes waiting to find a flaw, not because it exists, but because their very presence reminds others of what they failed to become. And this is the ultimate goal of character assassination through gossip, to level the playing field without having to level up. If they can destroy your image, they no longer have to deal with the discomfort of your excellence. They don't need to build, they just need to break. They don't need to grow, they just need you to fall. And in the event that they can't bring you down directly, they'll aim to weaken the foundation around you, your relationships, your credibility, your peace of mind. But understand this, the attack on your character has nothing to do with who you are. It has everything to do with who they are not. Gossipers are frustrated spectators. They cannot play the game, so they attack the players. Their words are camouflage, a desperate attempt to stay relevant while doing nothing of substance. They want the attention that comes with power, but they don't want to pay the price that power demands. So they try to steal the light by darkening your image. And what stings them most is not just your competence, it's your composure. That no matter what they say, you keep showing up, keep growing, keep building. Your refusal to break under their weight is what crushes them the most. because their power is imaginary, while your progress is undeniable. Great minds build, weak minds belittle. Gossip is a distraction used to disguise personal failure and lack of ambition. This truth doesn't emerge from philosophy. It emerges from experience. The more you rise, the more clearly you see the divide. Some people are wired to create, to build legacies, to climb with bruised hands and vision in their eyes, while others stay rooted in place, watching, talking, criticizing, and deflecting. It's not intelligence that separates them. It's courage. It's discipline. It's hunger. And gossip becomes the weak man's coping mechanism, a way to feel involved in greatness without ever contributing to it. It becomes the soundtrack of those too paralyzed by fear or failure to chase anything meaningful. You begin to notice that those who gossip the most are rarely the ones who have achieved anything worth defending. You don't see empire builders wasting time in idle chatter. You don't see the focused speak in circles about other people's business, because they understand time is currency, energy is investment, their attention is weaponized toward a goal. The ones who gossip are not wired for building because building takes structure, clarity, and sacrifice, and those who belittle are allergic to all three. Tearing down requires no effort, but building requires accountability, and that's what they run from. So gossip becomes their camouflage, their shield against their own mirror. This is why you'll always notice that gossip thrives in idle environments, workplaces where no one is being pushed, friend circles with no direction, homes where routine has replaced purpose. In these dead zones of ambition, gossip feels like activity. It fills the silence. It gives people the illusion of engagement when, in reality, they're just avoiding themselves. They talk about your life because theirs is too stagnant to talk about. And in this stillness, in this vacuum of purpose, gossip becomes noise they use to drown the voice that keeps reminding them they're wasting time. Those with a builder's mindset know that creation demands focus, and focus cannot coexist with gossip. It clutters the mind, it distracts the soul, it pollutes the emotional system. You cannot build something meaningful while contaminating your mental space with drama and envy. That's why successful people start losing touch with the gossipers in their circle. Not out of arrogance, but because the energy no longer matches. Builders start to feel suffocated in environments where conversation never evolves beyond speculation, mockery, and low-level criticism. Eventually, they have to choose, stay and shrink or leave and elevate. Most choose the latter, and in doing so, they become targets for the very gossip they outgrew. The ones left behind then begin crafting new narratives he forgot where he came from. She's too good for us now. They've changed, but what they never admit is that the change was necessary, even inevitable, because building forces you to shed layers, and belittling keeps you stuck in the same skin. It's not personal, it's environmental. The builder had to outgrow the belittler, not because of ego, but because of gravity. And the belittler resents this, not because they miss the person, but because they miss the feeling of being equal. Gossip becomes their revenge for being left behind in the ruins of comfort. What's most ironic is that those who gossip most intensely about others are often the ones most afraid of being talked about themselves. Their entire identity is built on projection. They ridicule others to protect their own fragile ego. They belittle to feel tall. But the truth is always buried just beneath the surface. They're terrified of their own reflection. So they keep their focus outward. They attack those with dreams because the silence of their own failure is deafening. They are not evil, they are empty, and gossip fills the void, not with joy, not with truth, but with distraction. It gives them a reason to look away from what they're not doing, not becoming, not facing. The more you build, the more you must learn to ignore the belittlers, not because they don't matter, but because they don't move. Their opinions are static, circling in loops of self, doubt and masked jealousy. Every great creator, every leader, every revolutionary has endured the weight of 1,000 voices trying to belittle what they dared to envision. But if they had listened, the world would have lost the very things it now praises. Silence is a builder's best armor. Progress is the only worthy reply. You don't defeat gossip with words, you outlive it, outwork it, and outperform the noise. And this is what the weak mind can never understand, that belittling others does not elevate the self, that diminishing someone's light will not make theirs shine any brighter, that gossip is not a measure of intelligence, but of insecurity. And until they confront that truth, they will continue to sabotage the very growth they envy. While great minds are drafting plans, starting movements, changing lives, and building legacies, the weak stay circling the same stories, repeating the same critiques, watching the same people they'll never become. That is the true tragedy of gossip, not what it does to the target, but what it reveals about the one who speaks.